a free mod, if that's what you want to call it, for the YZ250 two-stroke. If you caught my previous video, the YZ250 review, you'll recall that I mentioned about how they changed the cylinder head on the American model in 2011. They started using the European model cylinder head, which lowered the compression, and I assume it was to combat pain on pump gas. Ignore that loud rooster right there. Be quiet. And in the first video, I also discussed how this motor design originally was used starting in '99. They made some changes throughout the years. I would say the most powerful, most refined model, the first year for the most powerful refined model was 2006. In 2006, they were using the cylinder head that they first started using in 03 or 04 on the American model. And they were still using the same cylinder and the same engine cases and everything. However, there's one thing, actually two things changed. First being the head pipe right here. You'll notice they have a different part number, or they did have a different part number between 05 and 06. The biggest difference was the head pipe was extended about 10 millimeters. And another difference was the CDI. In 06, they started using this CDI, which they carried on all the way till 2020. I don't know why they have one different one for 21. Haven't looked into what's different about it yet, but I do know they use this CDI from 2006 to 2020. So in 2006, it was the first year of what I would say was the best YZ250 motor. We're specifically talking about the motor here. Obviously, the suspension got better. Like in 2015, they went to better forks and things of the such, but I discussed that in the first video, like I mentioned, the YZ250 review, so maybe you can catch that for that information. Today, we're only focusing on the motor here. And 2006, the 252 stroke battle was on. The manufacturers were selling hot. They were all competing against each other. I guess you can say it was like the horsepower wars was on. And even though they were about to, slim up the two-stroke lineup, Honda's about to get out of it, Kawasaki and Suzuki, but they all went out with a big hard punch, and Yamaha was right there with them with probably the most well-rounded motor. So I use that motor as my base because that really was the best. Since then, they've done some things to water it down, like the lower compression head or the European head. They started that in 2011. And then I stumbled into something else that they had done to water it down, and that's where this mod comes in. It's on the underneath the ignition cover, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that off and show you what I'm talking about. Alright, this is with the ignition cover removed. This is your flywheel. It spins with the motor. Spins with the crank, I should say. It's attached to the crank and spins. This is your ignition pickup right here. What this does is it waits for this high slab of metal right here to come across it when the crank's spinning. And most of you probably already know this, but it's just, and when it gets right over the pickup, it lets the computer know and it initiates a spark. Now the stator plate here is adjustable, so you can retard or advance the timing. There's 3 Phillips screws, one here, and one in there. And you loosen them up and you'll notice that they're slotted out, so you can spin the plate back here and advance or retard the timing. Since the crank on pretty much every motorcycle I know always spins the same rotational direction as the rear wheel when you're driving forward, so it spins counterclockwise, which would mean if you spin this stator plate clockwise, it would advance the timing, because as it's spinning counterclockwise, it would meet the pickup sooner. So that would be advancing the timing, and the opposite for retarded. Now the modification's already been done on this bike, but let me see if I can get some light in here for you. Oh, let me get this set up. Well, it's really hard to get it set up with this light, but you'll just have to trust me on this one. In 06, when this bike came out, the little line that you see, let me get something to point with here. The little line you see on the stator. Let me get my light in there. You see that little line right here, the thin little line? They put a line also on the case. Right, work with the light here. Let me see if I can get this better. Hold on, guys. Okay, on the case, you'll see there's also a little line. Again, the light's not working with me very well here, but you'll see there's a little line right here on the case. So you want this line right here. In 06, they had that line lined up with the other line perfectly, like they met perfectly. And that's how you knew you had it timed in, at least to the stock setting. And what I've noticed is, as of starting in 2017, at least as early as 2017, but probably earlier, I'm going to assume it's probably started about the same time that they went to lower compression head, that they started using a retarded timing, actually. Okay, you can actually see in that view right there how the two lines line up, the one on the stator right up here. This one right here lines up with the line on the case. And I've found that as starting at least by 2017, like I mentioned earlier, that this line right here, they have it adjusted a little bit behind the line on the case. Just a little bit, meaning they turn this stator plate back or clockwise just a hair to retard the timing just a hair. So if you take your time, loosen up these 4 Phillips screws and line that line back up. Well, first check yours, see if they are perfectly lined up. If they're lined up, you're good. But if they're not, if it looks like the line on the stator is just ever so slightly right to the line on the case, that tiny little line way up in there, I'm trying to get a better view of it. It's really hard to see, but you'll see it once you get it off. And if it's not lined up, just line them up perfectly. And that was actually the original stock timing setting of the original 06 bike when they originally designed this. They retarded it later on and also put a lower compression head on it to kind of, I'm assuming, to kind of ease up on the octane requirements. But man, you know, if you're running these things hard, you got a little bit of race gas in it, you know, you're going to want all that power. So what I did, I actually just set this time into this setting last weekend, and the results that I witnessed was definitely increased torque across the board. It has more torque off the bottom end. It kind of cured this little flat spot. It almost seems like a lean spot somewhere in the middle of the RPM range right before it kicks to its full top end. Completely took that away. Like, you can start way low in the RPMs, twist open the throttle, and it pulls rapidly with no flat spots all the way to the full revs. Honestly, I wish I did this earlier. You know, I've had this bike now. If you watch the first video, I did the video with, it had 15 hours on it, and now it has 72 hours on it. So I've done quite a few hours with the timing slightly retarded the way they've been sending them out lately. And I wish I would have put it back to the setting. It's interesting because I had these bikes, I've ridden a lot of them in 06. I own 2 of them. My brothers had a few of them, and pretty much everyone I knew around me had one. And I knew them very well. And when I went back to this timing, you know, to advance it back to the original 06 timing settings, the minute I fired it up, I could tell it was different. And it was like hearing an old song that you haven't heard in a long time. When you hear it, it takes you back. That's what happened here. I started up, and instantly just the way the motor sounded and the note it made and the way it just brought me right back to the original 06 and how good they ran. And I first started with a nice kind of woods cruise and just played around a lot with the low end torque and everything like that, and it was good and clean and crisp. Then I went out into a motocross training area and got to experience, you know, all the power that she would have. I don't know how much horsepower it gains. All I can say is it feels like 3 horsepower, but I'm gonna say it's more torque than it is horsepower. It almost seems like it just makes more torque everywhere, and that torque hands off to the top end horsepower at some point. But it's definitely a worthwhile mod. It's easy to do. It's free, and yeah. Just and it doesn't. I don't believe it matters what head you have. If you have the '06 head, or you have the 2011 and newer head, or you have a modified head like I have, I don't think it really matters. And the reason I say that is because years ago, if you watch my first video, you'll remember how I noted that I rode these bikes a lot back in the early days in '06 and stuff like that. And I was making a lot of mods to them. I had one that was built up to a full race bike. I mean, there's just, you know, had everything you could think done to it. And I remember playing with the timing back then. I was always searching for a little bit more. And I remember trying to advance the timing just a hair, like more advanced than what that mark is right there. And then I also tried retarding the timing just a little bit. And when I advanced it, I didn't really gain anything. It just kind of made the motor run kind of a little bit, you know, advance it further than what the '06 timing was at. It just kind of made it run kind of a little bit rougher, I guess you can say. I tried retarding it, and it kind of smoothed the power delivery, but it took the life out of the motor. It just kind of softened it up and just made it where you had to rev it out real hard to get the full power. So you found yourself keeping the RPMs up all the time. And I found that the stock '06 timing that I'm, you know, showing you right here, when you line these marks up, that stock timing was actually the best, even with a modified motor. I've come to the conclusion that it really doesn't matter what you do with this motor, as far as the changes to the cylinder head, exhaust system, or whatever, pipes or whatever, that timing mark right there, if you line them up, that's just the sweet spot, and that's really all there is to it. You can try other ones if you want, play with it, see what you think. I mean, put some comments down below, let me know what you think, but I think that is the sweet spot when you line them two marks up. And if you do that to your bike, if you just pull your cover off, and if they're not lined up perfectly, just line them two marks up and see what you think. I think you'll enjoy it. And while we're talking about free mods and things of such, spark plugs. The YZ250 uses a NGK plug that's a 8 in the heat range area. I prefer the 9 in the heat range area. It's one step colder. If you're running it hard, it's good. I mean, if you're just trail riding and stuff, the 8's probably going to be better for you. But with the 8 plug, I've noticed that if you run it real hard on the track, the bike sounds really crisp and clean when you're going around. I mean, when you're riding from the pit onto the track. But when you come back off the track, it just sounds a little different. It kind of sounds like it's running hot, even though it's not physically hot or overheating. And I've come to the conclusion that it was actually just the plug, the heat range. The heat range that they send them out the door with is kind of a heat range to fit all walks, kind of the middle ground. If you're just putting around in the woods, you know, it'll be warm enough. If you're hard on the track, well, then it'll be cool enough. But if you're actually really running it hard, you're going to want to go to a 9 plug. You'll notice that the way the motor starts up and how crisp and clean it is, when you're heading from the pit to the track, it will run just the same when you pull it off. And that's all because of the plug. I myself run the BR9 EIX. You know, like I owned a '06 KX250 back in the day, and that bike came with an 8 as well, although in the part schematic they had an optional 7 and a 9. So it's not uncommon to go to a 7 or a 9. So changing a plug is not like, you know, anything unheard of. Changing heat range is not anything unheard of. But if you're running it hard, and especially if you got some mods to her, going to a 9, even if you're just using the BR9 EG or the BR9 ES, it's not a bad thing. You'll notice that the motor stays cleaner and crisper running as you run it really hard. Well, that's it for the free mod, guys. As far as like mods you can pay for, if you call this a mod, the G2 short throw throttle, or quick twist, whatever you want to call it. It kind of takes out some of the twists, so you don't have to twist as far to get full throttle. The beauty of that is you don't have to drop your elbow to get full throttle, but it's also easier to get out of the throttle. You don't have to try as hard. We've all had wrist lock before we land, and you're like, you just can't get out of the throttle fast enough. A quick twist allows you to really get in and out of it quick, which can actually save your ass. And just for you guys noticing, I do run stock grips with safety wire, mainly because they last forever. The tips don't rip off every time you crash. They're a little hard when they're new, but as they get older, they get soft and they get nice and just sticky. I just put a dab of safety, some safety wire here and there to keep water from getting on them, so they, and the grip's so good. But that's it, guys. And again, if you haven't caught my first video, and you're into YZ250s, I highly suggest you catch a YZ250 review. And let me know what you guys think about this mod. If y'all have anything else you'd like to add to it, I do check the comments, and I appreciate you guys watching the video. Talk to you next time.